All right, so we're gonna go ahead and remove the exhaust now and able to get clear of the drive shaft and the power frame that goes here. And this needs to be removed from the rear diff. And in order to do that, we're gonna have to decouple the exhaust. And we have Poncho here doing exactly that. I'm gonna take these 2 screws off and remove this centerpiece. And on the other end, we have 3 screws here that have to be removed in order to decouple the downpipe. And we're gonna go ahead and remove this piece completely. This can stay in for the transmission. We also went ahead and removed the starter that goes here and the slave cylinder that is here, and it goes in this hole up there. We already had to remove the electronics, and those unplug here. And this is the one that goes inside the transmission for the speed sensor. What else is in there besides the speed sensor? Oh, the neutral sensor for the clutch. So we have Nathan here. He's removing our downpipe, and that's gonna release the centerpiece of the exhaust. And we need to do that in order to drop down the transmission. As you can see here, it's in the way. These things tend to be a little tight, so he dubbed it down with some WD-40. That's going to loosen up the screws and break down some of the rust that's created here. And that's going to allow us to not strip the screws on the way out. Got to be on the lookout for these gaskets. They tend to leak, and a telltale sign for that is to actually have water underneath, and that pretty much tells you that you have an exhaust leak, and the gasket needs to be removed and replaced. All right, so now we're removing the last bolt, and that's gonna allow us to remove the center pipe as soon as we decouple the rubber connections up here. We should be able to remove the piece completely and access our transmission. One thing about this custom-made pipe that we have is we have a really tight angle up there, so sometimes it's hard to remove the screw, especially when it gets tight and rusty. But our trusty mechanic here at DNA Garage has the knowledge and experience to go ahead and remove that screw without any interference. Because we have a really tight angle here, it's hard, and the weld seam here, it's hard to actually access the screw and put a socket on it. So they're using hand keys to remove it, and that's exactly what's taking a little longer. Now he's going to go ahead and remove our gasket. We ended up using a metal gasket here. It's a little bit more durable. It's actually aluminum, but it does seal pretty good. Okay, so now that the screws are removed, we're going to go ahead and drop down our center pipe.
Okay. So in order for the rubber won't break and it'll be easy, it'll be easy to come off, we usually shred a little bit of this stuff in there. Hopefully it goes in.
And then with a pry bar, you should be able to notch it loose. You want to pry against the chassis of the car, and that's going to allow you to come out easy. There you go. The next step in the procedure right now is to remove the stiffening chassis brace, which is held in place with 2 10s here and 2 10s on the other side. I on the other hand, also have some of the wiring that the relocation post for the battery that comes here, and we're going to go ahead and remove that as well. They're actually 12s, so he's gonna. They look like 10s, okay.
They look like 10s, but you keep them clean.
Yeah, I keep them clean. We went ahead and removed the 12s that go here. There's 2 and 2. We're gonna have a little bit of an issue with this because this is our grounding post for the battery relocation, and we need to wiggle this out of the way. So hopefully we can do it in such a way that we don't have to either cut this, and honestly it's a little too big. It doesn't need to be this long, so maybe we can just cut some of it off. But either way, we need to wiggle this out, and we only have this much room to play with inside this metal spacing here. Let them work. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that piece as well so we can lower the pipe in order to remove our bracket. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold it for him. And then actually we'll just stand here. That's gonna give us access right here, and that's where we need to go to remove the drive shaft. Hold on. Let me get the piece. Here. There are four bolts here that hold on the dry shaft, and we went ahead and removed one already. So the dry shaft couples here to the rear diff, and it has 4 screws. I believe they're 14s, and we went ahead and removed the one, and we have 3 more to go. They're 14s, right? Yeah. Okay. There's dust going on your camera, by the way.
Few more left.
All right. All right. So we got 2, and we have 2 more left, and that's going to allow the dry shaft to just slide down from the yoke. And so now we're going to go ahead and remove the dry shaft. And the way this comes out, it clears, and then it will slide out and go over there. We have a plug that we put in so the oil doesn't come out. It doesn't usually leak out right away, but it will tend to leak out.
When you bring it down, that's what it tends to.
Okay. And this is our little plug, and we put it in there so when we bring the transmission down, it doesn't leak. So this just stops the fluid from coming out. And here, all we need to do to remove the transmission, and we need to take this out and then also remove this panel. That's going to give us access inside, and there are I believe 4 10s inside there that there's a dust booth that we need to remove, and that's going to allow us to drop the transmission clearly. But right now we still have the components in place, so we're going to go ahead and remove them. Usually this spins out, but since this is a RX-8 and I cut it down, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I pretty much glued it in place. Another neat trick that I came across is you use this from a tennis racket, and this is when you re-sleeve the tennis racket handle, and you can go ahead, and it works really well as a dress piece. For most people like me, they get this remade, or you can purchase it, and it just helps to hold this in place, and it has a nice neat finish, and it works for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in here. Also, this comes out. Okay, and this is going to allow us to remove the pieces. I'm going to go ahead and some of the glue got in the way, so I'm going to just snug this loose, the material. It's going to clear. We can spin it once we have it out a little bit more. And now these I put in place because it's a very old car. But the way this comes out originally, it just has clips. So you would just have to pry it in here and pop it out. Since the clips are not working the way they should, I ended up using Allens, and I just drilled and tapped it into the plastic underneath. And they're very fragile, but it does its job, and it holds it in place and doesn't squeak or anything, which is a very common thing with these cars. The plastics are very fragile. So this is a nice, neat way of doing it. I know it's not a clean finish, but it does its job and it works well. Okay, so I'm just going to use this tool here to go around and loosen up the material. This is sway that we use here, and then there's a team that goes around the car. And now it's loose, so we have that. And this is going to allow us to remove the panel completely. All right, so we're almost out. This comes out most of the way, and the way I check it is I do this, and I can see that it's loose. I'll go ahead and pop up the brake to get to the other one. All right, so we are doing our second one here. I ended up using 4 altogether just to keep the panel down, and 2 of them are in the front, 2 of them are in the back. And then when we pull this panel out, you can see it's a very common thing for this panel to break, and it's very expensive at the dealer. And since I have it custom made, I chose to do this to keep it in place. We're on to the 2 in the back. There's 1 here and 1 here. The reason why you need 2 if you decide to do something like this is because one is there's a tag here, and then your hand sits and pushes down on it, so it does tend to bend, and this is just not enough for it to really hold it tight. So I ended up putting another one here. All right, so it looks like we're just holding it in one spot right here, and then there we go. We are loose. This will allow us to remove the panel. more or less, I believe. Are we completely out? All right, so there we go. We have all our pieces, and then now we are ready to lift. You have to be still very careful. We're gonna put the brake down, make sure the car doesn't roll away. And there are electronics back here that we have to unplug. So slowly you would have to put the tool down, look in here, and then we'll do one at a time, starting for the back. They tend to be pretty tight, but you just have enough room in there to put your hand and disconnect. It helps if you have a light or if you have experience doing this, but there should be about 3 or 4 plugs that you have to undo. Don't be afraid to pull a little bit on them. They do tend to get stuck because there is dust in here. But don't pull too hard because you are going to break it, and I promise you it is not worth replacing. So just be careful. And also, these pieces are very fragile, so when you pull the plug from them, you make sure that you hold it in place so that way you don't tug too much on the 4 little screws that hold that panel together, so you don't have to glue it back on later on. And there we go. That is the one that's actually the tightest. It's going to give us a little bit more access now. All right, so most of the clips here, you just press the button, it's in the center, and you remove it. The only tricky one is with the fog lamp switch. If you do have one of these, you have to press into the center and to remove it from the lock. All right, so most of the time, we tap wires in here, so just make sure it's out of the way. If you had your car be carpeted like this one is, be carpeted with a Mercedes is a carpet in here, make sure that you move that out of the way as well, so you have access to the dust cover, which is here. These are 410s, and we're gonna go ahead and remove it. As you can see, we could use another one. It is a little broken. I believe I have 2 of them on top of each other, but nevertheless, this is something that commonly breaks in this car, and I wish I would have purchased it, but I didn't think of it. All it does, it keeps the dust out. It's nice to have, but apparently I'm making decent coverage with 2 instead of 1 here, so we should be okay. Not as good as it should be, but it is gonna be okay. And also our new short shifter is gonna go in here, and I'm not sure if that's gonna come with a boot or anything, but I doubt it. And now we're gonna go ahead and lift, and this piece is removed. As you can see, it's been it gets dry up and brittle with years, so 25 years, that's what it is. I was able to I had 2 cars, so I borrowed parts from it. This is what happens. We doubled up on it, and that just keeps the dust away. And then here we are, we have full access to the transmission. This is the factory shifter, and we're gonna go ahead and replace this with our Riva Maya when we're done. All right, so this is the last shift this transmission and this shifter will ever see, because I am getting ready to remove it. There are 310s here, and I got a rag ready because I believe that it's gonna leak a little bit. There is oil in the transmission, and we just want to be safe. We don't want to damage the interior. And here we are, very simple. We're gonna just do that and release it. This is very common to be broken, but apparently we had it in one piece here. And then the new short shifter comes with a metal one, and that would ensure that this doesn't break. But this is actually very in decent shape. So I was getting nice crisp shifts, and this is why. All these components are here. If you have a loose shifter, if these are broken, you get a loose shifter, and then you don't have a clean, nice shift. But this transmission was shifting really well. So now that this is out of the way, we have the clearance that we need to drop down the transmission into the tunnel to be able to slide it out and out of the car. Okay, so this is a power plant frame. It couples the transmission to the rear diff. It's a solid piece of metal that's going to keep the alignment of the drive shaft through and narrow. We are having the transmission still bolted onto the engine right now, and we are removing this piece from the front with the 421s that is held in place with. It's very important to leave one nut in here. When you pry this open, the transmission will shift because the weight will go backwards, and then this will try to jump out. So by leaving this as a safety, when you do decouple it, and we go ahead and show that there, you have something to catch it on so it doesn't fall on you or somebody else that you're working with. All right, so in the back here, we also have 421s, 2 here and 2 up here. There used to be another centering nut here that would actually keep the diff nice and true. However, I am missing that right now, so we're not worried about this. Only the 421s up here. And this will remove the piece completely and allow us to just get out of the way. We don't really need it out of the way for the transmission to come out, but it's just nice to not have pressure holding on the diff. All right, so in order to remove the transmission completely, we need to disengage the clutch. And the Mazda recommended way is to remove the nut here. Are they 14s? 14. There's 6 of them, as you know, and you need to spin the clutch as you need to actually get to the next one. So we can go ahead and kind of spin this around, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The engine spins fairly easy, so there you go. And there are 6 of these. By removing this and then prying this back a little bit, that's going to disengage our pressure plate from our flywheel, and that's going to allow us to remove the transmission. And also, of course, you need to remove all the bell housing bolts, and there are 2 here, 2 more up here, and 2 more in the top. I believe there's 6 altogether. And on the manuals, and I think there's 7 on the automatic. Check your own manual for that. But you definitely have to remove these, and that's going to allow the spline to be loose so we can pull the transmission back and out. All right, so what we're doing right now, we are decoupling the bell housing from the engine. And in order to do that, there are screws all the way around the bell housing, and we're going to go systematically in a circular motion to remove those. You definitely want to have a jointed tool like this, because it is very hard to get with extensions that you need to get to the top up here to get to the bolt on top of the bell housing to clear all the metals here. It's much harder if you do not have this. It's actually almost impossible. You have to go in a straight angle next to the transmission. Hopefully you can get it out that way. So I recommend that you have a ball joint socket when you attempt this job. All right. So he's doing the hardest part now, removing the upper bolts that hold the bell housing. We currently have the bolt still in here because we decoupled it from here. It's a technique that the DNA Garage boys know how to do it. You can spring it out of place. However, Mazda recommends you remove these. And it's very important that you actually have these removed, all 6 of them, all the way around the perimeter before you go ahead and attempt to remove the bell housing.
Usually, I do the top first. Also, was taught by Louis that you have to lower the transmission first. You have a lot more easier access to the ones on top. So I do the top first, and then I do either one or the other. And then once we're ready to pull down, whoever's in the front right here, take that off, and then transmission should come down. Just for safety, it should we leave one at the bottom.
So in other words, what we want to do is use gravity assist, but by having the transmission, the heavy part of the transmission, allow the transmission to kind of give it a tilt. And to be able to do that, we just remove the upper screws first, and then we work our way down to remove the lower screws, and that makes the job a lot easier. Because Louis says so. Back at the top, we went ahead and removed. Back at the top, we went ahead and removed our left side screw, and now we're doing the right side screw. If you notice the screws, they're pretty much the same size. However, they're not all the same. Because of the way it kicks out here for the starter, this bolt needs to be longer. As you can see, it will normally come up to here. So just make sure that you put the right bolt in order when you reassemble it, that you get the long one to fit here. All right, so typically there's 6 screws in here. One of them comes down with the with the starter, so remove that off the bat. There's a really long screw with a nut on the other side, and then you have 5 other screws, 4 of which are the same, and one of them is longer and goes here, and that should allow the bell housing to slide off the engine casing, the rear mount. So I'm helping the boys removing it by prying against.
Ready?
Yeah.
There you go.
You good? Got it? Okay. Where you want to go?
Don't twist it. Let's go back on this side.
So now we're removing the pressure plate so we can free the flywheel. We need to get to the nut behind. And usually you would have this free if you did the Mazda recommended way, which is removing the bolts before you remove the bell housing. But since we popped the clip out, now we have to remove the pressure plate afterwards. The recommended 14 or 16, it was 16. It's aluminum, dude, you strip them. You telling me that's why my clutch is slipping?
No.
I don't think so.
No, it's not good.
No, I stripped those screws more than I care to remember, so I'm very careful. And
You go the correct way, and then you like shoot or you over tighten them.
that's what I'm saying, over tightening. I had your Louis, let me borrow the, what do you call it? It's all right, I got a hand. Me too.
So, pretty much, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you filming?
Yeah, we're filming the whole time. So here we are. We're gonna go ahead and remove the pressure plate alongside the clutch plate. You can put your finger in there if you want. We'll hold it together. There you go. And here we are. And as you can see, this is exactly why we need to change the clutch. The surface that it's getting ridden on, it's not wearing evenly. And this is exactly why our, this is, we had a brand new plate installed here when we put this in. Yeah, it's regular photo. You want to get this up? Okay, so what we're doing right now, we're removing the flywheel, and to do that, we loosen the nut, and we're gonna walk it out by hitting it and prying it systematically. What we're doing right now is we are removing the flywheel, and in order to do that, we loosen up the nut here, the main nut, and then we're systematically hitting it on both sides and prying it to get it to loosen up. Sometimes lubricant also helps. It does get a lot of pressure. This tightens really hard, so it does take a little bit of knocking and prying to remove it. It's not as easy as it looks. See? I know. That's why I need a new clutch. It was brand new. We just resurfaced this.
How do you?
No. We had the engine on the stand.
Jesus.
You have to unbolt the flywheel. Just unbolt three offset screws and get the puller from you.
So as you can see, it's not as easy as it looks to remove this. So what we're not doing is we're gonna remove the flywheel off the counterweight up here with the 6 nuts, and then we're gonna have a puller, a special made Mazda puller that's gonna remove the counterweight.
Yeah.
So we're gonna use the impact gun right here and remove the 6 bolts to give us access to the counterweight.
No, hold this.
This is a racing big style puller that's going to allow us to push onto the E-shaft and squeeze the plate out.
17.8, please. Yes.
Where can I hang this?
Anywhere.
And paint it?
It has to be either outside or somewhere.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Like, where can I hang it outside?
The garage door.
The actual door? Just let me
What
just.
happened? Did it pop out?
Oh, watch out, watch out. Here. Hold this.
It did pop out, right? Yeah. See? All that work with the hammer, and all it took is a few screws.
When you have the right tool.
That's because you already hit it with the hammer. It's already
That's true, but that's not really what. Maybe you got some of the dust off. But it's always important to have the right tools for the job because it makes things a lot easier. There's a prime example of that. And out with the old, and surely in with the new. And here we are, the Hyper Series XCEDI Racing Clutch. This is what we chose to go with, and we are really thankful to XCEDI for the support and helping us get the parts that we needed for our car. And this is the moment I've been waiting for. I'm going to go ahead and open the box and see what goodies lie within. And here we are, instruction manuals in multiple languages for everybody. We have our aligning tool. This is for our Mazda, so that is specific to our vehicle. This is a SFI certificate, so that is good to have. Of course, some stickers, and we actually might end up putting one of these on the car today. I think that would be very valuable since we have their support. And these are brand new screws that we're gonna use to mount this bad boy here into the rear counterweight that has been balanced and adjusted for our motor. And this is the big kahuna. I am very excited to see this. As you can see, there are two plates. Everything's nice and lubed. So let's go ahead and really enjoy these colors by removing the tape. So this is very important instructions that we got from XCEDI, and they were explicit that we follow these instructions to the letter to ensure that we get proper installment of this clutch. So we're gonna go ahead and read this before installation.
I got a mic pickup. 3, 2, 1, go.
So these are the instructions that XCEDI was specifically. Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right, so these are instructions that XCEDI specifically told us to follow in order to install this clutch properly. So we're gonna go ahead and put this here and follow the procedure. And here it is, pull type clutch from XCEDI, Hyper Series. Very nice. It's all nice and together now. We're gonna have to remove.
The Y, give me 1 second.
Pancho, can you grab the old clutch, please? Beautiful finish. Love this finish from XCEDI. The reason why we end up going with XCEDI, and in particular why I like XCEDI, is because they are OEM manufacturer in Japan. I have an XCEDI clutch. It's a stage 2. It's a 3-pot clutch, and that's the one we remove from the car. In fact, I'm gonna compare these two here. This is, all right, so this is what we removed from the car. This is their stage 2 clutch from XCEDI, and I was super happy with it. This does require that you have your own flywheel, lightened flywheel, which we do have, and our counterweight that is actually balanced for our motor specifically, so we can rev up to 9,000, is also gonna be installed onto here, and that you can see on the back side that it will be accepted right there. And we do have brand new bolts that we are going to install for this. And because we need to install that, this assembly needs to be removed. All right, so I'm very excited about this new piece. This is the first time I'm going with a Hyper Twin, and this is what I had before. So the power is gonna be there. The one important part about any clutch really is that you break it in properly. So there won't be any crazy driving for the next 50 to 100 miles. We'll let the plates be able to slide and make their grooves and adjust themselves in position before we subject them to a lot of power, so they wear in correctly. So I'm super excited to put this on. The first thing that we need to do is remove these so we can pull the plates apart. And to do that, we're gonna go ahead and just break them loose. We do have some specs. Worst part about this clutch is it's so nice that I just want to use it as an ornament in my house or my garage. I really don't want to put it in the car. It is that beautiful of a piece. But the performance that we're gonna gain from this is gonna be even more beautiful. So that makes me very excited to see this thing in action and be able to put the power that we made on the dyno to the wheels, as currently we are not being able to do that. So there we go. This is my fourth exit clutch. I systematically been going up from a stage 1 to a stage 2. We replaced stage 2, so that is my third clutch, and this is hopefully my final clutch, because these are interchangeable, so we can just change the plates as we need to. But this is my fourth edition of this clutch, and I do enjoy Ixedi's product. They make a fantastic product, and I just can't wait to have it in the car and enjoy the drive. And you need to loosen this up so we can use it. So the reason why we're removing it right now is because we need to use the counterweight that we still have attached to the old flywheel. And we are going to use the supply bolts here in the tensioning specifications that came in this booklet. And we have to be very good about getting everything torqued down correctly so we don't have any mishaps. And that's currently what Pancho is doing right now, is gonna remove this plate to be able to get to the bottom of it where those screws would reside. And this would be the last screw. We can finally reveal the plates. So this comes with a pull type ring. It's brand new. I'll go ahead and put this here. And there we go. It's beautiful. This is a sliding plate. There you go. Let's just do this like so. So we remove the first disc. This is our centerpiece. And this is our second disc. This is why it's a twin plate clutch. And now we have access to this part where we are going to mount our screws to the counterweight. Yeah, use that. There you go. So this is our old flywheel, and we're gonna go ahead and use our counterweight that's been balanced to our engine E-shaft. And this is one thing that we forgot to remove when we did the engine, is we put a note here to not forget to tighten the nut. And we're gonna remove this time around, so you get a proper job done. So this goes to the bottom of this stack, and I'm gonna hand it over to Pancho, and he's gonna have the pleasure in putting this back in. All right, so what we're doing is we clean the E-shaft because we did paint the counterweight, and some of that came loose onto the E-shaft, and we want these surfaces to be completely clean, both on the E-shaft and also on the counterweight. So we want these surfaces to be clean. Also the rear main seal, we want to clean that as well. Don't have any debris, and have it nice and clean so we don't have anything to break the seal, so we don't have any oil leaking out later on. And to do that, we use acetone. It's a better substance to clean with. And so this is it. That's pretty much all you need to do. And then of course, we want to clean the inside of the counterweight as well. Make sure you have your lock key that goes here. We did place it inside. It's on the top side. And we need to slide it on like so. And then Pancho is going to come in here and impact the nut back on so we can get this nice and tight and ready for the clutch assembly. Well, while we're here, I want to point out the belt housing screws so you guys can understand where they are. It will make it easier to remove it. So we have one up here, dot dead center. If you don't have any clutter, you can probably get it from the top. You can easily access it from there. But since we have all of this fuel system and wiring in the way, we only access it from the bottom in our case. We also have one on the side here, one more that actually comes out with the starter, so you don't have to worry about this. It's not really threaded. It has a nut on the back side, but the threaded ones are this one here, that one there, one here, and also one more over here. All right, so since we're here, I want to show you guys where the bolts for the belt housing go, and I'm gonna start with this one, and then we go to the one on the very top. There's also one next to it on this side, next to the pin, one at the bottom, and another one also with a pin on the bottom. And this one is actually a bolt through that comes out when you take out the starter. And now our main locking nut for the rear is torqued to spec. Okay, so now all we're doing is we are torquing the rear nut to specs. It's about 150 foot-pounds of torque, and that's how you do it. Okay, so now that we have this in place, we're gonna go ahead and grab the flywheel that came with our new hyper clutch, and we're gonna install that one with the new 6 screws that they gave us. And we're gonna go ahead and look at the specs that were given. This is the first steps of the procedures. We are going to put on the flywheel and torque it to spec. According to their manual, on page 12, step 2, it will actually give a vehicle-specific torque spec, and that would be to 54 to 74 Newton meters. What Nathan is doing with the pry bar is locking the engine in place so we can torque that down. The way we're torquing this is actually using their guide, and on page 12 you can get the specs specific for the car. This is for Mazda, and also the pattern, which way we want to tighten the screws, starting with the top dead center being number 1, the one below it number 2, the one to the right, east if you will, would be number 3, and to the west it would be number 4. We have 4 screws, so we follow the pattern in the star pattern, but that is the sequence that we have to follow. So what we want to do is clean the mating surfaces, make sure we don't have any oil residue, and that way we don't destroy the clutch by creating unnecessary friction in the hot spot. Okay, so what we're gonna do is install our first disc, and not all discs are created equal. This is actually the first disc and is notated by a B notation, and it has to be specifically this disc that goes in right now. And then we are going to, okay, so we're placing the first clutch in. Yes. And this one, according to their schematics, is 4B, and it's actually written on the disc itself which location it goes to specifically. So make sure you follow the instructions correctly when you install on this clutch. Otherwise, you're going to run into the issue where the clutch is not going to perform, or maybe not even engage correctly. So there we have it. Now the second disc, 4A, is going to go into play. And now this is the second plate that's going to go in, 4A. To complete the assembly. The only thing we're missing now is our last plate and the bolts. So we want all the surfaces to be cleaned with brake cleaner, and now that it is, I'm going to hand it over to Pancho, and he's going to install the last running surface, and I'm going to go ahead and provide him the screws that he requires to complete the assembly. This is our beautiful aluminum machine piece. It's our spring loaded assembly. And I'm going to hand them the screws with the washers. And also these have to be torqued to spec, and the specs are provided on page 9 of the instruction manual. And also the pattern in which you want to torque them in. Okay, so I'm going to open the instruction manual from Excetti, and I'm going to look at the torque spec. And according to them, we want to be at 38 Newton meters and torque it in the star pattern. All right, so it's important enough to reassemble this that all your marks lined up, and this is exactly where the lines mark up. You can see here. The reason why it is important is because this assembly has been balanced at the factory, and by ensuring that you line up all the marks here, that we put it back into position to spin correctly at the higher RPM and not having any shimmer. So now we're just tightening the assembly in a star pattern to get everything down to be tight, at which point we're going to torque it to the right position. All right, so now what we're doing is we are engaging the spring by tightening everything in a star position. And at that point, we're going to tighten it to the specific specs that are given in the booklet on page 12, and that is 36 to 38 Newton meters. No, it just had to be centered, right? It's weird that it's got that much play in there. I thought it locked in.
Yeah,
Oh, but it's just slipped.
it probably moved, yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. And we're going around, torquing it about 36 to 38 Newton meters. And yeah, we did a star pattern. Now we're going one by one, and we're just ensuring that we have the right specs to ensure a good assembly. So he's using his left hand to hold the flywheel. That way the engine doesn't spin. It spins fairly free. It spins fairly free, so therefore you need to hold it and just counterbalance with your other arm to get to the desired pressure. All right, so if you ever wanted to do a transmission job on RX-7, you'll be left with the 3 parts. These are the parts that we have to remove in order to get to the transmission. Our mid-pipe, our drive shaft, and our power plant frame, which is a Mazda thing, but this is what it requires to remove the transmission. All right, so this is what a speed sensor looks like inside the transmission of an RX-7. And this one actually goes in here. And you just plop it down and you secure it with a 10. So this is a freshly rebuilt transmission. I was having issues on the track last time I tracked the car with the synchros in 2nd gear. So since we were replacing the clutch, I chose to go ahead and rebuild the transmission. Usually what we do, we get some old JDM transmission. This is actually geared as a JDM because it is a JDM transmission. But I went ahead this time and spend the money to rebuild the transmission instead of just getting a used transmission with 40, 50,000 kilometers from Japan. This is a fresh rebuild, and I'm really looking forward to coupling it to the new Excetti clutch and getting the drivetrain to work proper with the horsepower that we're making currently with the car. All right, so 3 DNA strong boys, men. Three strong to put in the tranny.
I'm not sure.
What we're trying to do is close the gap by putting the screws on the bottom, and that would take some of the weight off the transmission and allow us to couple it up top as well. Here's the thing. You can.
Okay, there you go. Try it now. Because of the bolts, it wasn't letting me.
He's up already?
Yeah, they're loose. The whole engine is loose.
Okay. Wait a second. Does it go down a little bit? Okay. So, can we put one bolt on that side? On top?
No, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, let's get the other muffler stand. Nate, bring me the other muffler stand.
Why aren't you doing that?
Do it.
Huh? How's everything over there? Good?
Yeah, right there.
On the screws.
Not with the twin disc. Okay, keep on going.
Keep on going?
Yeah, you're on the spline. Yeah, but you're lined up.
Okay, stop right there.
Stop it there.
See if you can put that bolt on top.
Yeah, you should be able to. I see it closing.
Ready in or no?
Give me that.
No?
So you're saying that the twin plate is so
Because the
long?
clutches are apart,
Yeah.
it's hard to get both shafts in. But don't go too much, don't go too much.
Oh, I see. So the lining up the shaft is the problem.
Yeah.
Crack my block.
Did it go in?
You got a few threads on it.
That might not do it.
No, it's for some reason it's not strong.
Yeah, man, he got in.
No, you can't set up anymore. No. 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 Okay, hold on. Okay, hold on.
So the twin plate design has two plates, and lining up is actually a challenge, and this is the reason why we're having two jacks and we're trying to level up the transmission and the engine together and get everything lined up to get the spline through both the discs.
Oh, you gotta get one of them up?
Yeah.
Ya bajarle un poquito. You got it.
Let me see if I get it on my hand. It's already loose. You got it?
Do it like you did right now, like you went kind of close.
Yeah, you gotta get that. That was not in there. It's like a fountain. Where's the starter bolt?
Start board.
Where's your gun? The yellow one.
Oh, Eddie left it up there.
Go get my green one. My green gun.
So much space.
Do this one. No, do that one again.
No.
Do it. Go ahead. More. Okay, do the bottom. Stop. Now do the top. Stop. Now hit the other one. Yeah.
You're the boss. You think it'll stop working?
That's right.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I read a funny story on that, dude.
Did you?
Yeah, change that one. You have the other one, right? Did I get it back?
So right now that we have the transmission back in place, we're gonna go ahead and couple our rear diff with our power plant frame back to the transmission. We're gonna start at the back. And now that the transmission is back in, we're gonna add the power plant frame back onto the car. We're gonna start back here with the 4 screws, the 421 that we removed. And then we're gonna couple it in the front to the transmission with the other 4 and tighten it all down. And here's a close look at exactly what we're doing right now. We're putting those 2 and 2 more up here, and the same on the other side. Same idea as when we removed it. We want to put a nut here to hold the pressure and the weight of the differential before we bolt the transmission back up. And also to hold the weight of the motor, we're still using the stand for now until this actually sucks up and becomes one. All right. Not too loud.
Loosen a nut.
It's important that when we drop the transmission that we line up these to the center of the hole. It's slightly skewed, but we want to center up. That will give us the straight alignment.
It's not in the box.
There is. Yeah.
Cross member in the back. Oh, that's after the
Right there.
Okay, give me the starter with the bolt.
So now that everything is back into place, we want to go ahead and plug in our electrics, and we are gonna go ahead and basically bolt this up, put the starter on. Our slave is already back into place, and we're gonna cover this here. All right, the starter is going back in right now. It requires 2 bolts, a shorty and a straight through bolt that has a nut on the other side. So he's putting in the starter right now. It requires 2 bolts, and we just have to find the right one. All right, so the final step of the procedure, we're gonna.
2, 1, go.
And the final step of the procedure, we're gonna mount our dry shaft back together with the 4 14s. So putting the dry shaft back together is our next step. We're gonna mount the 4 14s that go here, and that's gonna set the dry shaft back in position. Hello.
It's the RR10.
Oh.
Is that what it is?
All right, so here we are. We're gonna put the screws back together to recouple our dry shaft,
That's extra.
and hopefully we put all the bolts back together. Maybe. There's a reason why I'm wearing Grady, because we are installing Grady wear. This is a diff cover that allows for more oil to be inside the diff, and that will keep the temperatures cooler for conditions like the track. All right. Last but not least, we had to mount our bracket here, our rigidity bracket. And that takes the 410s, and then now we're gonna have to put this back, which is our relocation negative ground. And he's gonna go get a 10 to be able to do that. Here's a closer look. We had to put our bracket back together, and we mounted the 10s. And now we're just gonna mount the grounding for the relocation of the battery. And this piece is the last piece that we need to put back together to finish our job today. And that's it. And here we are. We got the job done. One piece left. He's filling the back with some fluids. We did get new fluids in the transmission as well. We have a new Xcity clutch. We have a new transmission and a new short shifter, and I can barely wait to get it on the road. Of course, you have to break it in, so I'll be nice and gentle. But next time, I will be ripping on this new clutch.
Okay.
Let me check the size. Yeah, it's just the right
That's
size.
your bad. That's your.
What would you do without me?
I changed JJ, nervous. Sorry, JJ. Be careful. Let me
Yeah.
do the back first.
Just bring a crescent wrench and you know, hold it at one end. You already got the socket on the other. So this is a DNA product. They offer it in-house here. I don't know if it comes in black. I chose to paint it black. I like it black. But it is a 200 amp alternator that's going to help with getting more power to the ignition system, getting more power through all the electrical systems of the car. And overall, even if you have bigger speakers or you're driving some amplifiers, this is going to help get the juice to drive all those components that you need. Luckily, he had it in stock, and I'm not going to get stuck with the car over here. I'm going to put this in when we drop the car, and I will be driving home. So thank you, DNA Garage, for making an awesome product, and I'm looking forward to powering my Alpine speakers and also my ignition system with this bad boy.